Welcome to the Expert Speaker Summit. We are here with Heather Kent, author of the newly released #1 Amazon bestseller, How to Heal from My Narcissistic Relationship. Did I get the title right?
Heal from your narcissist ex.
How to Heal from Your Narcissist Ex. Today we're talking about what is narcissism and what do we do about it. So welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
How did you become an expert in narcissistic relationships?
That is an excellent question. So personally, I went through this experience myself in my first marriage. I ended up being involved with a narcissist, unbeknownst to me, in my very young years. And so I went through the whole cycle of 8 years of up and down and confusion and very kind of slow moving but insidious manipulation and emotional abuse, which was hard for me to see, very hard to see when you're in it. So having gone through the experience myself and then done the healing work required afterwards, I was able to learn a lot about the experience and what that looks like and how it feels. And then when I went back to school and did my master's in psychology and started working in private practice as a psychotherapist, I was shocked to see how many people were showing up in my practice in these relationships too, and kind of reeling from them and not knowing kind of how to make sense of what they were going through or what happened. And so it was a combination of my own experience and then working with clients in my therapy practice that brought me to this real kind of niche work, because it was just so, I was shocked to see how many people, in this small little town where I was working were coming in with this issue. And so that kind of was a signal to me that this is likely a much bigger problem than I had realized.
Let's define the term. What is a narcissist?
Excellent question. I think it's a word that's really kind of easily kind of flown around these days, because we're kind of living in this time of, we're calling it the era of narcissism actually right now. And so I think it's something that needs to be specifically defined because there's a lot of confusion about what narcissism actually means. Narcissism is a lot more than just, being self-centered and selfish and, thinking about yourself more than you think about other people. There's, it's a lot more defined and detailed than that. So in order to have, a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, the DSM-5 manual, which is the American Psychological Association sort of dictation of how to diagnose different personality disorders, they say that a person has to have 5 of 8 specific criteria, including a grandiosity, so a grandiose sense of self-importance, so exaggerating their achievements.
I'm gonna hold up a finger for each one that applies to me. I'm doing that one.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So yeah, expecting to be recognized as superior, etc. Is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success and power and brilliance. They believe that he or she is special and unique, and that they can only be understood by equally other special and unique high status people. Requiring excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement. So for example, like unreasonable expectations of being like given special treatment or automatic compliance. Exploits people to take advantage of them to get to what they want. Lacking empathy, this is really the hallmark part. So if a person is lacking empathy, so the inability to feel or think about how other people feel in a situation, or recognize or identify with the feelings and needs of other people, this is really what sets a narcissist aside from other kinds of personality disorders. It's that empathy piece that's the really big key. Is often envious of others or believes that others are envious of them, and shows arrogant, haughty behaviors and attitudes. So those are the 9 criteria that the DSM-5 sets out.
Okay, got it.
You have to have 5 of them in order to be diagnosed. Now, I personally find this diagnose this sort of criteria to be very limiting,
Uh-huh.
because it really only highlights one actual type of narcissistic personality. And there's 3 or 4 other ones that are very common as well. But the grandiose kind of spotlight, look at me type of thing is not only what narcissists look like. So, we might consider recent political figures as prime examples of what that looks like. And then we have
Donald
other
Trump, definitely a narcissist.
100%.
Would you say like most narcissist expert psychiatrists or psychologists would say like for sure these just got all the signs?
Zero argument, like no question, like beyond textbook, like
Okay.
extreme end of the grandiose type. Now,
Okay.
there's also what we would call a covert narcissist. And so a covert narcissist, again, still lacks empathy, doesn't care or think about the needs of others, only focuses on their needs and what they can get out of the situation. But a covert narcissist doesn't want to attract attention. They're actually inwardly, as they're all insecure, right? But that's what they're hiding from the world. But they're very anxious. So they report high levels of anxiety, high levels of depression. They may have other kinds of problems like eating disorders, that kind of thing. And they're very, very like secretive about their like inner resentments and comparisons. They're very much into comparing themselves to others. They're terrified of being perceived as negative by anyone outside. And so they're like the appearance of what people think is highly important. And so they do not want to attract attention from anyone because they do not want to be judged negatively. So they're terrified of negative judgment. And so they are quiet and don't want to attract attention because they want people to think that everything is perfect. Right. So
Mhm.
they're afraid of the judgment of others, but they're secretly very resentful. They harbor that inner grandiosity. They think that they deserve more, and they're very like comparing themselves to other people, that kind of thing. And so um, I have had experience with a covert narcissist currently in my life as a result of my partner's ex. And
Mhm.
so that's been interesting. And then we have also the really hard to find ones, like the hard to see ones, which was the one that I was married to. And we call this a communal narcissist. Now, the communal narcissist comes across as being a great person. They're super involved, they're very generous, they're, volunteering in the community, they're donating money, they're, heads of the board of directors for some kind of, organization in the community, etc. And so outwardly, they're coaching teams for the kids, they're doing all these things. They're super helpful, offering to help their friends and neighbors. And so outwardly, they seem like great people. But the motivation behind doing those things isn't because they want to give back, it's because they're looking for recognition and the status of what being
Mhm.
the best good person out there is. Right. And so it's the motivations behind those things. And so, and again, it's like the belief that they're superior, belief that they're better, that need to be recognized. All narcissists need constant external validation. And we call this supply. And the external validation comes in forms of any kind of attention, admiration, adoration, recognition, awards. Even if it's negative attention, it's still validating their existence. And so
Mm.
they're constantly in need of this supply. And it's like, think of a gas tank with a hole in it that can never get filled.
Uh-huh.
And so always looking for supply from, and they need multiple sources because one person can never provide enough.
Okay, I've got a couple questions about narcissists. Are they born or are they made?
Um, that's a debatable question, up for debate still.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
Genetic predisposition. So are they made? There are definitely genetic components to it. So for example, if there's a strong family history of mental illness or personality disorders, psychiatric disorders, then you'd be more susceptible to possibly developing it, just because of your genetic makeup and the
Okay.
DNA and how the brain is wired and all those things. However, we also see that once they are in their environment, the environmental factors are large predictors of whether a person is going to develop narcissism or not. Um, for example, very commonly within in a family dynamic, if there's a narcissistic parent, quite often one of the children will end up being a narcissist too. That can be a big predictor, as an example.
Okay. And if a narcissist identifies or is diagnosed with what do you call it? Narcissistic behavior disorder?
Personality disorder, so
Narcissistic.
NPD. Yeah.
Can they fix it? And how long does it take?
Oh, absolutely, yes. There was an article in Psychology Today. I think it came out in January, and this was the exact title of the article. Can narcissists be healed? And the answer is yes, with a huge caveat though. So let's take Donald Trump as our example.
Mm-hmm.
Can we imagine him, one, admitting that he has a problem? Can we imagine him, two, agreeing to go see a professional about this problem? Can we imagine, three, accepting that there's a diagnosis for his issue? And number four, that he needs to do something about it. So let's say he agrees to all of those things. Okay.
Yeah.
Then they have to agree to commit to doing the work to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like a 12-step kind of sequential process. And you are constantly fighting against this ego, constantly. And so it's very slow work because it's like, you make 5 steps forward, take 3 steps back. And so you're constantly in this back and forth, trying to break through these insecurities, these habits, these ways of thinking, these exploitative patterns of thinking. And so it is possible, but it's a commitment and it takes a while
Gotcha.
and so bottom line, getting a diagnosis is difficult because you have to get them to admit that there's a problem. So I think there was something like 10 million diagnosed people with NPD in the world. I would argue that the number is much higher because those are the only people that are diagnosed, right? Most narcissists would never admit that there's a problem because they're perfect, right?
Yes.
So back to the Donald Trump example, can you imagine him admitting that he's wrong or that he has a problem?
No.
Exactly. So
He's Donald freaking Trump.
exactly.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Okay.
The election was fraudulent because he lost.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
Okay.
he can't accept that. There's no acceptance of responsibility. There's no acceptance of accountability. There's no acceptance, blaming everybody else, lots of gaslighting, lots of pointing the finger.
What is gaslighting?
Excellent question. Gaslighting is the favorite type of emotional abuse used by narcissistic personalities. And it is purposefully used to make you question your sense of reality. So they might say, so when you bring something up that was inappropriate that they did or said, they might say, that never happened. I never said that. You must have been dreaming. You're crazy. I remember you told me that you're anxious. This is your anxiety acting up. You're just being anxious and crazy. This never happened. You're blowing things out of proportion. You're too sensitive. I was just joking. Can't you take a joke? You need to lighten up. I only did that because what you did first. These are like examples of things that they would say.
Mm-hmm.
And it really makes you question, or like, that never happened, or that wasn't the way you remember, it wasn't that bad. And so then you really start to kind of, maybe I did misremember. Maybe I did get it wrong. Like maybe that didn't happen the way I thought it did, right? And they'll use your insecurities and your weaknesses against you to kind of throw that back at you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we've defined narcissism, we've defined gaslighting. Why is it that now we are in the era of narcissism? My assumption might be that it has something to do with social media, but you tell me.
Definitely, that's a huge player in it, 100%. So there's a few things going on based on kind of the research that's out there. Social media absolutely is creating this very self-centered view and like obsession with the self and obsession with getting recognition and like admiration from others, right? So you have, for example, like teenagers becoming suicidal because they didn't get enough likes on a picture that they posted of themselves.
Oh my.
Yeah. And so this fixation on the self and the selfies and the posting and the likes and the comments, all of this feeds into the ego, right? And so narcissism is really an ego problem. And so the ego is just out of control and in driving the bus. And when we have a blow to our ego, we can't tolerate it, right? So narcissists cannot tolerate criticism. They cannot accept any kind of feedback that is negative. They can't accept that they may need to improve. Something they did isn't perfect. Something they're doing is there's a better way of doing it rather than what they're doing. They cannot accept that because it goes against this false image of the perfection that they're putting forward. So social media is a classic example of that. Everyone's portraying the highlight reel, right?
Yeah.
It's perfect. And if we're not getting enough recognition for that, that's a blow to our ego. And so social media is creating this concept of obsession with the self and needing to be recognized and seen by others.
Yeah.
So definitely that's a big part of it. Another part of it is like this societal norms, I think, that have developed and kind of shifted over the past 40 to 50 years in terms of not wanting to hurt people's feelings
Okay.
in schools, for example, and in sports teams, that kind of thing. So instead of, when you and I were in elementary school, there were awards for excellence, awards for, getting good grades. There were things that you could, be recognized for if you did well in school, or you got a trophy if you won something, if you were the best at the sport you were competing in.
Uh-huh.
But now everyone gets a medal. Everyone gets a trophy. Everyone gets a certificate because nobody wants their feelings to be hurt,
Uh-huh.
right? And so we were decreasing resilience and the ability to fail and the normalizing that failure is part of living, right?
Yes.
And so when failure happens again, it's devastating to the ego. They can't handle failure, right? And we're in school, kids don't fail.
Mm.
They don't get held back. They don't, right? I remember being a teacher in high school, having to justify, like basically it felt like I was going to court, justifying why the kid got a 45
Right.
and why they
Now,
didn't
Heather,
pass the
would you say
class.
is this a North American phenomenon?
I'd say it's a Western phenomenon.
Uh-huh.
I wouldn't say it's specific only to North America. I'd
I
say
have
it's like,
no idea what school's like in China and Russia, but I have a feeling they hurt people's feelings all the time.
so if you take a Japanese math student
Uh,
next to a Canadian math student, they're going to be a whole lot more disciplined. And so,
gotcha.
yeah, so there really has been this sort of turn away from excellence and this shift to, everybody wants to feel good,
Mm,
right? And so that's another part of, I think, what's driving this situation that we find ourselves in now. And
gotcha.
then we have public figures glorifying this behavior, such as the former president, and justifying behaving this way and basically being a public example that this is acceptable. I mean, the guy was impeached twice
Mm.
and is still not being punished for
He
his
likes to
behavior.
set new records. He likes to break the records. All right, let's talk about your book, Heal from Your Narcissist Ex, The Ultimate Guide to Safety and Sanity. Tell me what you mean by safety and sanity, and what is the process to get to this safety and sanity?
So, in my experience, when I was going through this, and in the experience of the clients that I worked with, both individually and in groups, this experience of abuse that we go through leaves us feeling extremely unsafe we like, when we go home, that's supposed to be the safe haven, right? You go home, you let your guard down, you let it all out, you can relax, people accept you for who you are, and that it is what it is, and everything's fine. When you're in a relationship with a narcissist, or when you live with a narcissist in your family, because it might not be an intimate relationship necessarily, you're never relaxed. You're constantly walking on eggshells, wondering what's going to set them off, wondering what's going to happen next, anticipating possible catastrophe, how you can mitigate that, what you can do to make things better, what you can do to make things easier, how you can, avoid the blow up and the conflict. And so this turns into this, and like there's this power and control, and you are, this small, shriveled version of yourself. And so safety is not something that exists anymore. And so reestablishing safety for your nervous system to be able to recover is really important in terms of trauma healing. And so we are not in a safe situation when we are in a relationship with an emotionally abusive person. And so establishing a source and a feeling of safety is the number one. I mean, safety is the number one most important thing to our survival, right? If we look at the hierarchy of needs, basic safety is number one. And so when we don't have that, we can't focus on anything else.
So I can understand physical safety, physical safety. Tell me about what is emotional safety.
So emotional safety is, it's really hand in hand with physical safety. A lot of people really assume that people are not in abusive relationships unless there's cuts and bruises and scars to show for it. But the physical abuse is always accompanied by emotional abuse.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have physical abuse without emotional abuse. And so emotional safety is where you are, valued, you are accepted, you are not being bullied, you are not being manipulated, you are not being verbally abused, you are not being controlled, you are not being cut off from your friends or family, you are not being financially controlled. And so in a lot of situations, financial abuse is a huge part of this as well. And so again, having independence, being able to provide for yourself is a piece of safety too.
Yeah. That's an interesting term, financial abuse.
It's huge often in these types of abusive relationships. I actually spoke with a woman this week who is, because of what he has accused her of in terms of his his request for divorce, or like the submission of divorce. He is not, she's going to be on the hook for paying for the divorce based on what he claims she was doing. Often what they will do is that they will project the behavior that they're actually doing and accuse you of doing that. And
Mm-hmm.
so because he did that, now she's not able to, get financial support to pay for the lawyers to help her to litigate this situation. And so, she's in dealing with like a women's shelter organization to help her navigate through this because she has no money to her name.
Mm.
He has full access to the finances.
Is this usually the man as the narcissist, or can the woman be the narcissist?
Women absolutely can be narcissists, 100%.
Uh-huh.
And as I said, in my current case, this is what we're dealing with.
Uh-huh.
And so, and I've actually had quite a few male clients come to my practice as well, who were married or involved with narcissistic women. So it isn't a male only problem. It's more prevalent in men than it is in women. But definitely I have come across my fair share of women narcissists. I used to work for one.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Too bad. Okay. Why did you write this book, and who is it for? Heal from your narcissist acts.
So my motivation and my inspiration for writing this book were my clients. So the clients that showed up with this issue, the clients that, were able to face and accept that this is what was happening to them, and then wanting to do the work to get out of it or get over it and heal from the trauma of what happened. Because what happens to your brain as you're exposed to abuse over a long period of time is that your brain actually physically and chemically changes. And so being able to kind of work towards healing those wounds and recovering from those traumatic experiences, this is what they want to do. And so in working with them and watching their very brave, commitment to doing this work was what inspired me to write this book. Because like I said, it alerted me to the fact that this problem is likely much bigger than I realized. And so if there are other women out there suffering like I was, then I would love to be able to help as many people as possible and allow them to know that, you're not crazy, you're not alone, help is available. And I wrote this book as a kind of a guide to get to the healing, to get to the other end.
How's this book different from other books out there on this topic?
So because I'm a registered psychotherapist, I take an evidence-based approach. And so my background is in trauma assessment and treatment. And I used to, pre-COVID days, offer animal-assisted therapy too as part of my work in recovery from traumatic experience and PTSD. And so the way that I designed this book was kind of a sequential step-by-step process. First, understanding your experience, so doing a lot of psychoeducation and learning what narcissism is and how that affected you, what happened to your brain. We look at trauma and the brain, and then we look at specific evidence-based, like clinically proven interventions and strategies to help you to heal from the trauma of what happened. And so versus a personal experience, here's what I learned. Yes, there's that in there as well, but it's also based on evidence and based on clinical experience that I've had.
Awesome. Okay. Do people need to be in a state of mind where they're wanting to date again before they do this kind of work?
Absolutely not. 100% not. You can be still in it and trying to get out. You can be still in it and know something's wrong, but not know what it is. You can have just left. You could have left 10 years ago, but know that you're still like impacted by what happened. It absolutely doesn't require you to be in a state of looking for a new relationship to do this work. In fact, I would argue the opposite.
Okay. Let's play a game called How to Spot a Narcissist.
Ooh, I love this game.
What are the signs and how can you tell you're dating a narcissist or you're working for a narcissist, or maybe how to tell if you are a narcissist?
Okay.
You
Are you
mentioned
ready?
what was it, 9 different things?
Yeah, so the DSM-5, like I said, the criteria for diagnosis
Okay.
is those 9 things. And as I said, yes, and there's more
Okay.
to it than just those things,
Okay.
because that just really boxes in the grandiose personality, right?
Yeah.
So we've got
Yeah.
the grandiose, we've got the covert, kind of insecure, anxious person. We've got the communal narcissist, and the last one, which I didn't mention earlier, is we call a malignant narcissist. And these are the most dangerous ones. And this type of narcissist really borders on that psychopathy, like psychopathic, sociopathic kind of personalities. And they're part of what we call the dark triad because they get joy from inflicting pain and suffering on others. And they actually purposefully set out to do it. And so not only do they not have empathy, but they look to crush you no matter what.
Jeez.
And so, yeah. So those are the type of people who are, extremely dangerous and difficult to get out from underneath because they are so like domineering and
Yeah.
stop at nothing.
Yeah.
So here we go. How to spot a narcissist.
Yes.
Number one, does this person experience an exaggerated sense of self-importance? So is their sense of self way over the top compared to how great they actually are? Does this person require constant admiration or validation from others? That's that supply part, right? Do they need their tank to be filled from other people all the time? Does this person expect total compliance from others. Do as I say. Do not argue. What I say goes. My way is the best way. Does this person struggle to recognize the emotions and needs of other people? This is the empathy piece. Can they even get there? If they can get there, do they care? Does it impact their decision making? Does this person ever expect special treatment or favors from others? Does this person ever experience jealousy about the success of others or things that other people have? Is there competing, a kind of keeping up with the Joneses? Do they have to go out and have the best stuff, the newest car, the coolest gadget, the most beautiful house? Does this person insist on having the best of everything? And do they assume that other people are jealous of them and their talents and their success? So those are kind of key points. So if the answer is yes to more than one or two of those things, I'm going to go ahead and say you're likely dealing with a narcissistic personality, especially if that empathy piece is missing.
Yes. Yes. All right. Common mistakes people make when they are in a relationship with a narcissist.
Well, so one of the things that we tend to do when we're being gaslit is trying to defend our position and defend ourselves. So we'll try to justify why we did something, or explain why we're upset, or explain our perspective, or defend a decision that we made, or we're constantly just trying to make our case. And that just feeds into them using that as fuel against you. And so often we will try to explain or get into an argument or like a defense of whatever it is that's going on in the conflict. That is a big mistake that a lot of people make. The best way to do it is just to say nothing and agree and walk away. Because what they look for, like I said, is the supply. They want the fight. They want the engagement. They want the interaction. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. They get what they need. They're getting supply from you. And so if you're giving them attention, and if you're engaging them in some kind of a discussion or an argument, or you trying to defend yourself or explain something to a narcissist, that's feeding into exactly what they need. And so we often kind of get spiraled in that because we're being accused of things that obviously aren't true, or we're like being told that what we remember isn't true, or that something never happened. And we're like, yes, it did. Remember this happened and then this happened. And they're like, no, it didn't. You're crazy. This is your crazy coming out. And so it just continues. It gives them more fuel to continue to gaslight you. And so that would be a common mistake. Another thing that I know I used to do, I used to rationalize their behavior to make it make sense to me so that I could feel okay about it, right? And so we're really good at rationalizing why they did. Oh, they're really stressed. Oh, they're just doing that. He just did that because he's really tired. Oh, once this big presentation at work is over, things will get better. And so we'll make excuses and explain the behavior away to make it okay for us to stay. Well, really what we're doing is we're teaching them that they can continue to treat us this way because we're tolerating it, we're enabling it. And so that's another big thing that I learned as well in my own experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Calling out a narcissist is a terrible idea.
Uh-huh.
You can never ever say that that's what they are. It's never going to end well. Don't do it. You can know it, keep it to yourself. Do not accuse them of being one, because that does not end well.
How does someone explain what they're going through to family and friends?
That is an excellent question. So many, I'm not going to say many, every single person that I have worked with in this situation has struggled to get people to understand what it's like unless someone else has been through it themselves. And so really the best thing you can do is share some videos and resources on what narcissistic personality is, what gaslighting is. If you go to YouTube and search what is gaslighting, show that video to your family. If you go to YouTube and what is narcissism, show that video to your friends. Get them to understand what you're dealing with, because as I said, the outward presentation of a narcissist is that they're perfectly lovely people most of the time. I mean, you got the extreme ones like we talked about, but most of them present very well. They have this excellent external mask that they perform when they know they have to. And so most people on the outside, I can't count how many times I was told, "Heather, you are so lucky. He's the best guy. You're the best husband. He's so amazing. Like, you're so lucky to be with him." And I'm like, "Yep. Do you want to go home with him?" So, like,
Okay.
because nobody knows what happens and how
Yeah.
things change when they're not in public.
Do people tend to think it's their fault when it's happening to them?
Always.
Mhm.
A lot of self-blame, a lot of guilt, and a lot of shame gets carried about, how could I let this happen? I'm an educated person. I know better. How could I not see this? How could I be so stupid? Why did I stay so long? In my case, why did I go back? What's wrong with me? All of those things are very, very common things that we carry. And none of them, of course, are true.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's part of the work that we do as well, is healing those beliefs.
Yeah. So this book you wrote, it's about the ex, and sometimes the ex reaches out and opens up contact again. What do you advise for people who hear from their ex? How do we proceed with that?
Don't proceed at all. Ignore. Do not even engage. Ignore, block, shut down, delete, whatever it is. Do not engage.
Yeah.
No contact. Now, sometimes that's difficult if, for example, it's a partner and you had children and you have to have contact.
Yeah, that's impossible, huh?
Impossible. But co-parenting is not possible. So what you have to do is something called parallel parenting, which I talk about more in those situations. But when you're in a situation where you can't go no contact, for example, if it's a boss or whatever, then you want to do something called gray rock, which basically means you interact as little as possible in as boring and emotionless a manner as possible, so that they're not getting any benefit from interacting with you. So the gray rock is like being boring, being a gray rock.
Uh-huh.
And so you one line answers, one word answers, not engaging, sometimes ignoring when possible, only talking about logistics, what's necessary, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Parallel parenting, co-parenting. Gotcha. That's interesting.
Yeah, parallel parenting is the only way to do it. You cannot co-parenting with a narcissistic person is not possible. It's just, you can't do it. So you just have to ignore what's going on over there, focus on what's going on with you, what you're doing at your house with your kids, and you cannot think about or deal with what's going on over there.
Gotcha. Okay. Then, other than your two books, what other resources can people look for from you?
Yeah, so if you're not much of a reader, you can absolutely head on over to my YouTube channel. I've done a few interviews on this topic as well. And there's, again, wonderful resources online, but my YouTube channel, you can find a link to that on my website, actually.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much for all of this great wisdom and insight into narcissists and how to get over your narcissist ex. What is the best way for listeners to get in touch with you?
So if you would like to get in touch with me or chat with me, you can go to my website, heatherjkent.com. And there's a link on my website for you to book a consultation with me, and you can do that absolutely free. I have some time blocked off in my schedule for consultations. I would love to hear from you, like if you have questions about whether you're dealing with this, or you know someone who's in the situation, or you're looking for some support. I would love to hear from you and talk to you. So if you go to my website and click on schedule a call, you'll be able to book in some time with me. I would love to hear from you.
Heather Kent, two-time best-selling author. Thank you very much for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.